Hey guys, Michael here, and I am going to be doing this video on Hellhaven. So this is going to be like the pilot episode, essentially, of Hellhaven, just really kind of like a summary to get you really, into the spin-off of the Outsider series. Now, I'm doing this actually at the same time as I'm doing the Outsider stories as well. I'm going to try and probably do, every so often I'll do a little bit of Hellhaven and a little bit of Outsider and kind of try to keep that formula going. Now, next week I'm probably not going to be uploading a new video because next week I have actually the baby's due date. So because of that, I don't expect that I'm going to probably have like a video at least for about maybe like a week or two. Maybe even longer, I don't know, but I'm definitely going to keep you guys posted. If I do decide that it's going to be longer than 2 weeks, then I'll probably wind up doing another video talking about me not actually doing a video, if that makes any sense. So with that being said, I'm going to dive right in. Basically, Hellhaven starts off with a prologue. So Edward Ackers, for a year, he would be comprising details on the council. The council is a criminal elite secret group running all organized crime in Arbor City and Hellhaven. These wealthy white-collar criminals are heads of organizations that are controlling money, assassins, drugs, and basically whatever else is going on within the two cities. Edward Ackers is the only person daring to oppose the council. After a year of Edward Ackers basically trying to comprise this detailed, files on these people and trying to bring them to justice, the council manages to find out about its plans. We never really find out how until, later on in the first season. So I'm going to kind of save that surprise for later on. Edward's police connections to the Hellhaven PD is through a close friend who is basically murdered. And he also is working in tandem with another person who will be introduced as well in the pilot episode. So it is Thomas J. White right now, as of right now. I think that the name was going to be changed, so I don't really know if it's going to stay the same. But yeah, he basically is kind of like our Commissioner Gordon, but not necessarily, because he's kind of almost like a cross between that and Quentin Lance from Arrow, if you guys are familiar with that. But yeah, it's kind of like that. And pretty much he's taking all of these files and he's building a case. Edward basically hides his 10-year-old son in a panic room because he knows that they're basically going to come after him now. And after pretty much finding out about all of this, he hides his son and pretty much gives detailed instructions to Julia Matthews, who is a trusted family friend. Instead of it being an Alfred, she's kind of almost like a mix between Leslie Tompkins and Alfred and a handful of other characters, but I digress. She becomes basically the guardian and caretaker for Ian Ackers, and Julie is basically going to pretty much create a foundation for the training that he eventually begins and becoming the Hellhaven demon Night Prowler, whichever one. I really prefer to call him the Hellhaven demon, but I feel like I'm kind of rambling a lot in this episode. Pretty much what winds up happening is, early on, Ian winds up, being this small boy that's kind of in a lot of ways like Bruce Wayne, where he's just pissed off all the time. And he's trying to figure out kind of how to cope and deal with, the grief of losing his father and not having his mother around now. And because of that, he winds up going to Kane the Brawler Murdoch, who pretty much runs this UFC gym and trains people how to fight and box and do all this other stuff. Early on, Ian actually deduces that this, trainer used to be a vigilante known as the Brawler. And he Kane isn't aware that Ian knows, but yeah, Ian knows the whole thing. And Murdoch basically, despite his, hesitation to agree to working with Ian and training him, he actually winds up training him. And pretty much the 10-year-old boy works like, really, really hard to like, learn how to be like this expert fighter. And he sees a lot of promise in him. He works pretty much very hard to decrypt these files as well that his father left behind. When the council learned that Ian had survived, they waited and tried to kind of make an attempt to murder the boy again. So by the age of 13, they tried to make another attempt at Ian's life and set the house on fire. And Ian would fake his death, and with Julia's help, he would disappear. As a parting gift, he gives Kane Murdoch some better gear to learn how to fight in, pretty much revealing at this point that he knew who he was and pretty much knew everything about Kane Murdoch being the brawler. Ian for years would train with some of the best and most skilled trained and well-trained fighters, basically coming out of like the shadows and returning pretty much after faking his death. He pretty much returns back, and that's pretty much like the prologue for that. Then it leads into the pilot episode, which is Ian Ackers, after his return from faking his death, would feel that he was ready to know what his purpose was. 24 hours after legally being resurrected, Ian would take his rightful place in the company, Ackers Tech Enterprises, and he would gain access to a lot of failed experimentation that was basically scrapped by the company. Ian, however, would use his amazing intellect and his mind to create create like things that these experiments really weren't created for. So what he would do is he would repurpose everything that he pretty much had that was failed experimentation and utilize it to basically help with his crusade. When the council would learn of their failure to murder Ian, they would decide that it was time to kind of finish what they started with him. And Ian and Julia, they are attacked in the mansion by a small army of guys. Ian, hearing them infiltrate the house, he would hide Julia in a panic room, much like how it kind of mirrors how his father basically did it for him. But instead, Ian basically winds up killing all of the attackers and leaves one alive, basically telling them that he's essentially their nightmare. After the cops basically come into Ian's house and see a whole bunch of basically dead armed guys, and the one guy that they managed to interrogate, they pretty much learn that this vigilante pretty much attacked, and they're kind of like half believing it, only because it sounds like it's almost like way too fantastical, and it sounds like almost like some kind of supernatural thing that kind of attacked and took out these guys. So pretty much when the cops are there, then you learn about this new character, Nina White, and she is the daughter of Thomas J. White, who I mentioned earlier, but she's also the partner of Thomas J. White as well. So pretty much what wound up happening was, with Nina White in her origin story, it's going to be pretty much established that the character wanted to become a cop, and her father refused to let her become a cop. So she joined the department and kind of really faced like this uphill battle to become this, become a cop and then become a detective. And her father pretty much didn't trust anybody in Hellhaven, because Hellhaven is a lot like Gotham City in that way. So for that reason, the only person that he really trusted to kind of watch his daughter's back was himself. And since he was still a detective, he wound up partnering with his own daughter. Nina and Ian, they basically make plans to catch up, and Ian pretty much tells him that this person/demon looking thing came and saved him and Julia. And Julia basically says nothing to the officers and kind of keeps it very ambiguous. And after they leave, she's like, you're being kind of less than honest with them, and I why did you tell them that, this thing pretty much saved us when it was you? And he's like, no, that thing is what actually saved you guys, and is what saved us, and that's what basically helped us. And so that pretty much leads into the idea that he's pretty much gonna speed up the process on what he was originally going to do. He was originally gonna wait weeks and try to kind of establish more as Ian before Nightprowler pretty much appeared. but he jumps up his plans and starts building the suit and starts working on everything to become the Hellhaven demon. Ian would go out and take on small groups of criminals and would get stabbed. And after returning home, Julia would find him and stitch him up. With no hesitation, he basically, tells her pretty much what's going on and about his crusade. But Julia pretty much is, really disappointed and disapproves of everything that he's doing. And Ian basically tells Julia, my father tried to fight them using the law, and he wound up being murdered for it. And, I'm pretty much going to become something else. Where he failed as a man, I'm going to, succeed as something else. So yeah, Ian basically finishes working on the Night Prowler gear, and then after that, starts taking on criminals in, the dead of the night. And after doing all of that, he really does wind up attracting the attention of the council, and they hire an assassin. And the episode basically ends with him moments away from killing the assassin. But pretty much, I have the whole scene planned out in my head. Excuse me. So yeah, the scene basically goes like this, where he basically beats this assassin, and everything is pretty much done in true comic book fashion. And then the cops show up. And when he's literally about to land that killing blow, they have all of their guns lined up on him, with Nina basically being in the front and Thomas J. White being in the front lines of this. And he basically is sitting there and looks up with his piercing red eyes and puts his hands up, and then he camouflages and disappears. It's almost like Predator style camouflage, but then he just disappears into thin air and lets go of the guy that's the assassin. And that's pretty much how that encounter ends. And he manages to escape, and then you pretty much have the remainder of that pilot episode where it's establishing the groundwork for what's going to be happening for the remainder of the season. So you learn more about the council in the end of that. And in those final moments, you learn that there actually is something that the council is planning on doing that will be very, very huge. And you learn a lot of things throughout season 1, like how the council actually was formed. And you learn that the council was actually formed, which is the reason why Edward Ackers knew so much, is because one of the top members of the council was actually friends with Edward Ackers. And they started it really with the intention of trying to clean up the city and trying to be a buffer, if you will, of when it came to money and everything else. And it was really supposed to be used to kind of help the city. And the head of the council basically turned around and kind of pushed him out and started really using it to kind of make this organization that would rule the criminals and stuff from the shadows for money purposes and everything else. So essentially they created it with the intention of stopping criminals, and it turned into this criminal organization. In a lot of ways it is crazy, because then you learn the council has pretty much infiltrated everything. They are literally a part of everything in that city, and even sometimes branching outside of the city. So they're kind of almost Court of Owls type thing, but a lot more direct in a lot of ways. They're not shrouded in this mystery or anything like that. They're still shrouded in mystery because you didn't know that they necessarily had a name for their secret club or whatever the case is. But either way, I'm gonna bring this video to an end. I hope you guys enjoyed the little summary of Hellhaven's pilot. And if you guys want to hear any more Hellhaven stories, please make sure that you guys hit the bell, comment, subscribe. And hit that bell if you want to never miss out on any Outcast Comics content. I am probably going to go back by the time that I stop doing the, dealing with everything as far as, the birth of my son and whatnot. I will probably wind up recording part 2 of The Outsider for the Origins. and then after that I'll probably dive right into Exodus. Or I mean, I don't know if, like, maybe I might just merge both of those parts together, so make it like a longer video, like a 14-15 minute video. But either way, thank you guys, and peace.